Wade. There comes a moment in every human life when truth stops whispering and starts echoing. Not outside, but inside. A quiet, relentless knowing that no distraction, no distance, no silence can erase. And for the one who chose avoidance over connection, that moment is not loud, but it is undeniable. Because you can run from a person, but you cannot run from yourself. Avoidance feels powerful in the moment. It feels like control, like you're protecting your peace, guarding your space, choosing. Wade, yourself. But what is it really? It is the fear of being seen, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear that if you stayed, if you opened, if you allowed someone to truly know you, you might lose control. So you leave first. You pull back. You create distance. You convince yourself it wasn't right, it wasn't real, it wasn't meant to be. You build a story that justifies your escape, and for a while, that story works. But truth is patient, and truth does not argue, it reveals. Because one day, in a Wade, quiet moment when the noise fades and the distractions lose their power, something surfaces. A memory, a feeling, a realization. Not forced, not dramatic, just clear. You had something real, and you let it go. Not because it wasn't good enough, but because you weren't ready to receive it. That's the part no one talks about. Avoidance isn't about the other person being too much. It's about you not being able to hold what was given. Real love requires presence. It requires openness. It requires a, Wade, willingness to face yourself, your fears, your wounds, your patterns. And that is where most people run. But here's the truth. When you walk away from something genuine, you don't walk into peace. You walk into a lesson. And that lesson will follow you in different phases, different situations, different moments, until you are ready to confront it. Because life does not punish. It teaches. And what you avoid today becomes what you repeat tomorrow. Deep down, you know it. You know the connection. Wade was different. You know the way they showed up was rare. You know the depth, the sincerity, the consistency, it wasn't ordinary. And you also know you didn't meet it fully. That realization doesn't always come with regret at first. Sometimes it comes as restlessness, as a quiet dissatisfaction with everything that follows, as an unexplainable feeling that something is missing even when everything looks fine on the surface. That's not coincidence. That's awareness knocking. And awareness is a, Wade, gift. Because the moment you see clearly, you are no longer a victim of your patterns, you are responsible for them. Now the question becomes, what do you do with that truth? Do you bury it again? Do you distract yourself again? Do you tell yourself another story? Or do you rise? Do you finally face the part of you that runs? The part that fears closeness? The part that equates vulnerability with weakness? Because that part is not your enemy. It is your unfinished work. Growth is not comfortable. Wade, it does not happen in isolation. It does not happen in avoidance. It happens when you lean into what you once ran from, when you stay present in moments that trigger you, when you choose to communicate instead of withdraw, when you allow yourself to feel, even when it's uncomfortable. That is strength, not the ability to detach, but the courage to connect. And here's the deeper truth. Fumbling something real is not the end of your story, but refusing to learn from it, that's where the real loss, Wade, happens. Because every missed opportunity carries a lesson, and every lesson, when embraced, becomes transformation. You cannot change what you did, but you can change who you become because of it. You can become someone who no longer runs when things get real. Someone who no longer hides behind distance and silence. Someone who understands that love is not something to control, it is something to honor. And when you do that, you don't just change your relationships, you change your life. Because, Wade, the quality of your life is directly tied to the depth of your connections. And the depth of your connections is determined by your willingness to be seen. So stop running. Stop convincing yourself that detachment is power. Stop mistaking distance for peace. Because real peace is not found in avoiding what scares you. It is found in mastering it. And the moment you choose growth over fear, responsibility over blame, presence over avoidance, that is the moment you stop fumbling your life. Wade, start living it. Avoidance often disguises itself as strength because, on the surface, it looks like control. When someone pulls back, goes silent, or emotionally detaches, it can appear as if they are choosing peace, choosing independence, choosing themselves. But beneath that controlled exterior lies something far less powerful and far more human fear. Not just any fear, but the deep, quiet fear of vulnerability, of exposure, of being truly seen without defenses. Real strength does not come, Wade, from shutting people out. It comes from the ability to stay present when every instinct is telling you to run. Avoidance, however, operates in the opposite direction. It convinces you that distance is safety, that detachment is clarity, and that walking away is maturity. But what it's really doing is protecting unhealed parts of you from being touched, challenged, or revealed. Think about it when something doesn't matter. You don't feel the need to escape it. You don't feel overwhelmed, weighed, triggered, or uncertain. You simply move on without resistance. Avoidance only activates when something is significant enough to shake your internal world. That's the paradox. The very thing you're running from is often the very thing that has the power to transform you. Fear doesn't always look like panic or anxiety. Sometimes it looks calm. Sometimes it looks like indifference. Sometimes it sounds like, I just don't feel the same anymore, or I need space, or this isn't right for me. And, Wade, while those statements can be valid in certain contexts, they can also be shields, carefully crafted narratives that allow you to exit without confronting what's really happening inside you. Because staying would require you to face discomfort. It would require you to communicate honestly, to express needs you're not used to expressing, to sit with emotions you've spent years avoiding. It would require you to let someone see parts of you that you're not even comfortable seeing yourself. And that, Wade, level of exposure can feel threatening if you've built your identity around control and self-protection. So avoidance steps in like a false protector. It says leave now before it gets deeper. Pull back before you lose yourself. Create distance before you get hurt. And in that moment, it feels like you're making a strong decision. It feels like you're choosing stability over chaos. But what you're really choosing is familiarity over growth. Because fear always prefers the known, even if the known is limiting. The truth is, emotional courage is far more demanding than emotional withdrawal. It takes strength to stay in a conversation when it becomes uncomfortable. It takes strength to admit when you're scared, when you're unsure, when you don't have all the answers. It takes strength to risk being misunderstood or rejected in order to be authentic. Avoidance skips all of that. It offers a shortcut away to escape the immediate discomfort without resolving the deeper issue. But that, issue doesn't disappear. It simply waits. It carries forward into the next interaction, the next connection, the next opportunity for closeness. So what appears to be strength is actually a delay of growth. It is fear wearing the mask of control, convincing you that you are safe when, in reality, you are stuck. And until that mask is removed, the cycle continues, different faces, same pattern, same outcome. When someone withdraws from real love, it can feel like relief at first. There's space. Again, silence replaces emotional intensity. The pressure to respond, to show up, to be consistent, it all disappears. And in that moment, it feels like you've escaped something overwhelming. But what actually happened is not an escape from pain, it's a postponement of it. Because real connection, especially one that carries depth and sincerity, doesn't just vanish when you walk away. It leaves an imprint. It settles somewhere within you, not always in obvious ways, but in subtle, persistent ones. At first you might distract yourself. You fill your time, shift your focus, convince yourself that it wasn't the right fit. You create reasons that make your decision feel logical, even necessary. But emotions are not logical, they are stored. And what is stored does not disappear. It resurfaces. The pain you thought you avoided begins to return, not as a single overwhelming wave, but as small, quiet moments. A memory that catches you off guard. A comparison you didn't expect to make. Realization that something meaningful was left unresolved. These moments don't demand attention, they linger, patiently, until you acknowledge them. This is where the multiplication begins. Because now, it's not just about the original connection. It's about the absence of it. It's about the questions that were never answered, the words that were never spoken, the version of yourself that never fully showed up. You don't just feel the loss, you feel the incompleteness of how it ended. Avoidance, creates unfinished stories, and unfinished stories have weight. That weight follows you into new experiences. You may meet someone else, engage in something new, try to move forward, but the pattern hasn't changed, it's only been paused. And when the next situation begins to mirror the last one in depth or vulnerability, the same discomfort arises, the same instinct to pull back returns. Not because the new person is the problem, but because the internal conflict was never resolved. So now, Wade, instead of one moment of discomfort that could have led to growth, you carry multiple layers of it. The original fear, the unprocessed emotions, and the repeated pattern. That's how pain multiplies. Not through intensity, but through repetition, and repetition creates frustration. You begin to notice that things don't quite feel right, even when they should. You might feel disconnected, even when someone is trying to connect with you. You might feel restless, even when everything seems stable. Wade. That's because the root issue, the inability to stay present with vulnerability, has not been addressed. It's simply been transferred from one experience to another. Real love doesn't demand perfection, but it does require presence. And when you withdraw from that presence, you're not protecting yourself from pain, you're delaying the very process that would have helped you grow beyond it. The discomfort you tried to avoid doesn't disappear, it evolves. It spreads into different areas of your, Wade, emotional life, showing up in ways that are harder to trace and more difficult to resolve. What could have been a moment of clarity becomes a cycle of confusion, and the longer that cycle continues, the heavier it becomes, not because love was the problem, but because it was never fully faced. Deep down, there is a level of awareness that doesn't need validation, explanation, or even expression. It simply exists. And for someone who has walked away from something real, that awareness becomes a Wade, quiet companion, never loud enough to disrupt daily life, but never silent enough to disappear completely. On the surface, everything may look composed. Decisions are justified, narratives are built, and life moves forward. There may even be a sense of certainty in the choice that was made. But beneath that surface, beyond the logic and the explanations, there is a subtle knowing that doesn't fully agree with the story being told. Because truth doesn't rely on words, it lives in feeling. And, Wade, feelings have a way of resurfacing when you least expect them. Not always as regret, but as recognition. A recognition that what you experienced was different, that the connection carried a depth that is not easily replicated, that the way someone showed up for you consistently, genuinely, without pretense was not something ordinary. This awareness doesn't always arrive immediately. Sometimes it takes distance. Sometimes it takes contrast. You meet new people, experience different dynamics. Wade, slowly begin to notice what's missing. Not in an obvious way, but in small, almost imperceptible ways. Conversations that don't go as deep, effort that doesn't feel as intentional, moments that lack the same emotional presence. And in those moments, something clicks, not loudly, but clearly. You start to see that what you had wasn't common. And more importantly, you start to see how you responded to it. That's where the deeper realization begins. It's not just about what was lost, but about how, Wade, it was handled. The hesitation, the withdrawal, the emotional distance that created a gap where there could have been growth. You begin to recognize that the ending wasn't solely about incompatibility or circumstance. It was also shaped by your inability to fully engage with what was being offered. This isn't always an easy realization to sit with, because it challenges the narrative that protected you. It asks you to look beyond external reasons and examine internal patterns. It invites you to, Wade, consider that maybe, just maybe, the connection didn't fail because it lacked something, but because you weren't ready to meet it at its level. And that kind of awareness requires honesty. Not the kind of honesty you share with others, but the kind you hold with yourself. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken out loud, because it's already understood internally. You may never admit it publicly. You may never reach out, never revisit, never express it in words. But that doesn't change the fact, Wade, that you feel it. In quiet moments when there's nothing to distract you, it shows up. Not as overwhelming regret, but as a subtle sense of I know. A knowing that you encountered something meaningful. A knowing that your response didn't align with the depth of what was given. A knowing that if things were different within you, the outcome might have been different as well. And that awareness stays with you not to punish, but to inform. Because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee. Wade, It becomes part of how you understand yourself, your choices, and your patterns. It becomes a reference point, a moment that quietly shapes your future decisions, whether you acknowledge it outwardly or not. And even if it's never spoken, never shared, never fully explored, it remains steady, quiet, and undeniably true. Growth does not begin with awareness alone. It begins the moment awareness is followed by ownership. It's one thing to recognize what happened, to see the patterns, to feel, Wade, that quiet internal truth. But recognition without responsibility keeps you in the same place, just with clearer vision. Real change starts when the focus shifts from what happened to you to how you showed up within it. Blame is easy. It offers relief without requiring transformation. It allows you to point outward, to explain your decisions through the actions of others, the timing, the circumstances, the imperfections of the situation. And in doing so, it protects your current identity. It, Wade, keeps you comfortable, because if the problem was always outside of you, then there is nothing within you that needs to change. But comfort is not growth. Responsibility, on the other hand, is uncomfortable by nature. It asks you to look inward, not with judgment, but with honesty. It asks you to examine your reactions, your defenses, your tendencies to withdraw or shut down when things became real. It asks you to consider that your choices were not just reactions to external events, Wade, reflections of internal patterns, and that shift from external blame to internal responsibility is where transformation begins. Taking responsibility does not mean condemning yourself. It does not mean labeling your actions as failures or defining yourself by past decisions. It means acknowledging that you had a role, that your behavior contributed to the outcome, and that within that realization lies the power to do things differently moving forward. Because if your actions helped create the Wade result, then your actions can also create a new one. This is where many people hesitate, because responsibility removes the illusion of control that blame provides. It doesn't allow you to stay in the story where you were only reacting. It places you in a position where you must now respond with intention, and intention requires effort. It requires awareness in real time, not just in reflection. It means catching yourself in moments where your instinct is to pull away and choosing to stay. It, Wade, means recognizing when you're about to shut down emotionally and instead choosing to communicate, even if it feels unfamiliar. It means allowing yourself to feel discomfort without immediately escaping it. This is not easy work. It challenges habits that may have been built over years. It disrupts patterns that once felt like protection. But it is also the only path that leads to something different, because without responsibility, awareness becomes repetition. You see the pattern, you, Wade, understand it, but you continue to follow it. Not because you want to, but because nothing has been actively changed. Responsibility is what breaks that cycle. It introduces a new level of consciousness into your actions. It creates space between impulse and response, and in that space, growth happens. You begin to respond differently, not perfectly, but intentionally. You become more present, more open, more willing to engage with what you once avoided. And over time, those small shifts begin, Wade, to reshape how you experience connection, how you handle discomfort, how you show up in moments that once triggered you. This is how transformation unfolds, not in sudden dramatic change, but in consistent, conscious choice. Blame keeps you anchored in the past, tied to explanations that justify your behavior. Responsibility moves you forward, giving you the ability to evolve beyond those behaviors. And the moment you truly accept that shift, you stop being controlled by your patterns and start, Wade, becoming the one who changes them. There is a common misunderstanding that power lies in detachment, that the ability to walk away, to remain unaffected, to keep emotional distance is what makes someone strong. But that idea, while appealing, is incomplete. It confuses protection with power and avoidance with control. True power is not revealed in the absence of feeling, it is revealed in the ability to remain present within it. Staying is not passive. Staying requires awareness, discipline, and, Wade, courage. It means choosing to face what arises instead of escaping it. When emotions intensify, when uncertainty appears, when vulnerability begins to surface, those are the moments where real strength is tested. Anyone can leave when things become uncomfortable. It takes a different level of strength to remain grounded and engaged when every instinct is telling you to retreat. Feeling is not weakness. Feeling is information. It tells you where your boundaries are, where your fears exist, where, wait, your growth is needed. But if your first reaction is always to shut those feelings down or move away from them, you never learn from them. You never understand what they're trying to show you. Instead, you develop a pattern of avoidance that limits your ability to experience depth in any form. Staying allows you to process rather than suppress. It gives you the opportunity to understand your reactions instead of being controlled by them. When you remain present in moments of discomfort, you, Wade, begin to notice what triggers you, what causes you to withdraw, what beliefs are operating beneath the surface. And that awareness gives you a choice, something avoidance never offers. Because avoidance is automatic. It reacts quickly, often without reflection. It removes you from the situation before you've had a chance to fully experience or understand it. Staying interrupts that pattern. It slows things down. It creates space between what you feel and how you respond. And in that space, Wade, begin to act with intention rather than impulse. Becoming is a process that can only happen through engagement. You cannot grow into a more open, grounded, and emotionally available version of yourself while consistently avoiding the very experiences that require those qualities. Growth demands participation. It asks you to show up, even when you feel uncertain, even when you don't have all the answers. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to stay in situations that are unhealthy or misaligned. It, Wade, means recognizing the difference between discomfort that signals growth and discomfort that signals harm. Many people leave not because something is wrong, but because something is unfamiliar. And unfamiliarity can feel threatening if you're used to staying within a controlled emotional range. But transformation exists outside that range. When you allow yourself to stay and feel, you expand your capacity. You become more resilient, more self-aware, more capable of handling complexity in, Wade, relationships and within yourself. You learn that emotions, no matter how intense, are temporary and manageable. You build trust in your ability to navigate them without needing to escape. And over time, that changes how you experience connection. You're no longer operating from fear or avoidance. You're operating from presence. You're able to engage more deeply, communicate more honestly, and respond more thoughtfully. Not because you've eliminated discomfort, but because you've learned how to, Wade, move through it. That is where true power lives, not in distance, but in presence. Not in shutting down, but in opening up. Not in running away, but in standing still long enough to understand, to grow, and to become something greater than who you were before. Thank you for taking this journey of truth and growth. May it guide you toward deeper clarity and strength. Goodbye for now, and remember, the courage to face yourself will always lead you to something greater.